Hi, thanks for joining us for another episode of Expat Experts. Today we've got Natalie Callaghan. She is in international real estate. The company is called Anarock and she runs the strategic partnerships, which today hopefully we can discuss further because we found this really interesting. And we also think that our listeners, mainly expats, could benefit from finding out about this area and just getting tips and advice from Natalie as well, given her years of experience. So Natalie, I'm going to let you now introduce yourself as well and just talk a bit more about your background and what you're doing with Anarock.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me firstly. So I obviously work for the Middle East office of obviously Anarock. Proudly lived in the UAE now for 12 years. Originally didn't obviously come from obviously a real estate background. I graduated roughly around the economic crisis, and obviously there was limited opportunities for me. And I remember thinking, I'll travel for a year. And I decided to do it via red lips and red heels. So obviously I worked for one of the largest brands, don't need to mention them obviously by the colour. And it allowed me to travel to 65 countries.
Wow.
Which just gave me a massive global insight really. Then obviously, over the 12 years, I've then obviously stepped into the real estate industry. Anyone who is familiar with Dubai or maybe not so familiar with Dubai, it's just a huge, like massive industry obviously over here. It's bringing in a lot of money and business, a lot of opportunities. So obviously I wanted a slice of that.
But the reason we wanted to get you on is because so many people are looking to buy here or rent or move. It's such a big market, like you said. So just give us an overview of the current real estate market in the UAE and what are the popular expat destinations? Is it Dubai now or is it Abu Dhabi as well? Just talk a bit more about the climate as it is now and what you're dealing with.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, like, obviously for me personally, for 12 years here, people when they first started moving over, there was like relocation packages. Obviously the brand I work for allowed that, so I obviously got my rent paid for and everything else. And I feel back then people would be like, I'm going to stay a contract, so they'd stay 3 years max. Whereas obviously as Dubai has developed, we've now come into a scenario where people are moving their families here, people are staying here for the long term, me included. Like I kept saying 1 year, and I've stopped saying that now because obviously I'm really happy here.
12 years later.
Yeah, no, literally it took 12 years. My dad keeps asking when am I coming home. But,
and you're like, I can't do it.
And so obviously like that's had a massive impact. And then, in terms of obviously real estate itself, like, people now are more end users, not necessarily just investors. So again, the climate's probably changed. I'd say it's dramatically changed in the last 5 years. COVID had a massive impact on that. So in the last 5 years, we've just seen a huge influx of, international investors coming in. We've had, massive kind of developments in terms of obviously the, the economic plans that obviously the government have got in place. And these obviously then are implementing different master communities, different developers are coming in. And it's just, fantastic opportunity to kind of have a slice of a great lifestyle, safety.
Well, even when I do come in, I just constantly see developments being built. I'm like, oh my God, they're making more stuff. So they're obviously expecting all these people to move.
Well, the plan through the government is they're planning to obviously grow the population by 7 million by 2040. I think we're currently around 3.9. So you can see, obviously, like, it is a very, you could obviously say in a sense, an aggressive growth plan. I've watched many videos of obviously, the leader obviously of Dubai, and obviously his plans is to always be number one and the greatest and the best. And I think that's what's really kind of helped our industry is it brings them in. And then the other aspect is, visa opportunities, for example, tax-free living. As a woman, it's incredibly safe. And I think that's a huge aspect.
So people are just drawn to coming here, and you can see why. So I think even in a relationship, one person wants to go, and then they just kind of convince the other one to come, and then they're like, actually, it's really nice here, and then you just get used to it. I think you miss family, that's a given, but then you see them as well because.
Again, I guess once a flight attendant, always a flight attendant. I'm able to get home in 7 hours, whereas I don't know if I lived in, let's say, London, just to kind of get across the city of London, it takes me 2 hours anyway.
Exactly.
So what's 5 hours more?
What's 5 hours more?
an Emirates flight. So
No, of course. I was just wondering if you could perhaps talk a little bit more about your specific role actually in the company, and so what these strategic partnerships look like, just so that the listeners can learn a bit more, maybe a bit about these benefits for businesses, that sort of thing. It'd be really interesting to hear about that.
Yeah, no, so obviously my role is quite interesting. So obviously, you know, it's a very fast market in terms of a lot of sales brokers, and obviously a lot of kind of, like I say, international investors. What I do notice, a bit similar to, I guess, the London bubble, is we're in a bit of a Dubai bubble sometimes. As soon as you kind of step out of Dubai and you start talking about our industry and what's going on and, you know, the exciting plans, people are a little bit probably not as aware. So there's a clear opportunity for us, obviously, as a company, and obviously myself, to kind of go out there and share that message.
Okay.
What I essentially do is allow businesses and individuals that are aligned with kind of our values to basically essentially kind of create almost a business stream for us. So it's basically collaboration, maximising obviously networks, and again, just giving obviously those opportunities. So I'm definitely more the B2B side, which I love. I've always loved kind of like that entrepreneurial mindset. And I've loved kind of like, you know, having that interaction with, you know, diverse kind of different industries. And then obviously, just to kind of give you an insight of my history of real estate, I, you know, I've gone through different roles. I've obviously gone through the sales role. So I'm not sitting here like, you know, I don't understand that aspect.
Sure.
I've then had the blessing of training probably around 200 brokers in the past. So I've done kind of all different kind of
which is
sectors.
sometimes you have to do, so you know that market and you're like, I'm here now because I know that, I know how you guys work.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what are things that expats should look or consider when they're looking to rent or buy here? What if they came to you and said, look, Natalie, I want to buy here, I'm going to move my family, what kind of advice would you be giving them?
I think the key aspect is lifestyle. You know, there are probably different ways you'd look at Dubai. Like, you know, there's the villa communities, for example, which tend to be a little bit more inland. Waterfronted communities, majority obviously tend to be obviously apartments. However, then we do have our famous Palm. So you obviously have those icons, but obviously as Dubai is becoming more, you know, the population's increasing, of course, then the demand and the supply is then obviously affected. So we are seeing a migration of obviously people renting in different places, buying in different places. So I think obviously budget does come into an aspect. So obviously that has to be taken into account. If you're obviously a part of a family, then you need to obviously consider schools, you know, close by hospitals. Don't want to think obviously that you're going to end up having an accident, but it's the reality. Even say like, you know, the location of your workplace. So traffic, I'll be honest, has increased.
Oh my God, traffic's
really
insane. It was never this bad.
No, never this bad. Like I'd say now, you know, something that I'd normally kind of estimate a 20-minute journey and now kind of give myself 40 minutes.
You know, someone showed me a picture the other day and it was like a flying drone. But like a taxi. I was like, are you joking? They're like, oh, Dubai's predicted to have this soon. I was like, it's like it's in a movie. Oh, that's good. We can just skip traffic and just fly over it. It's crazy.
I know, but like even in the sense of like future initiatives, like I always say, look, I lived in New York for a period while I was studying. And I've always had this dream of living in New York. So it was like this exciting city. You know, you grew up and all films were about New York. You know, and they always called it the melting pot. But then, you know, I've said it before in previous things, like for me, we are the modern version of New York. Like what New York probably did in 100 years, we've kind of accomplished that in really, you know, 50 years. Even Dubai real estate market compared to other cities, really, we've only really been in action for around, you know, just over 20 years.
So still young.
Very, very young. It's a young market and, you know, it's a growing and, you know, it's definitely leading in many aspects. But, you know, I think the biggest key factor with obviously new investors coming in would be, again, it's very important that obviously working with licensed brokers. You know, so again, they're up to date with obviously rules, regulations. Someone that's obviously aware of the market. I would be honest, I think you need to get like a broker who's focused on that area. So, you know, someone who has expertise, has obviously the stock. It's a very fast moving market. So it's, again, expect the speed.
You need to know everything, don't you? You need to be on top of it.
Like things now come onto the market and they're not long on the market anymore. So that is definitely having an impact. So again, having that awareness. But like I say, lifestyle's key. location of obviously where you're working. And really, you know, are you an individual or are you coming over with your family? Again, it's you know, what you do in terms of sports, your, you know, leisure activities, there's all those aspects which you need to take into account.
No, that's really helpful to kind of look at the considerations for expats moving over here. Do you have any, from your experience, sort of challenges that you could share that you see expats facing when they are moving over here?
Or finding a house, for example, or...
Yeah, because obviously I think people don't realise, obviously, say maybe the legal side and what documents you need.
Sure.
Obviously, you know, you can do non-resident mortgages, for example. But obviously if you're doing a residence mortgage, then again, there needs to be, you know, a certain amount of like salary needs to obviously go into your account for obviously 3+ months.
Well, someone rang me up in the UK. It was like, oh, if you win a mortgage in the UAE, they can look at your UK bank accounts as well. And they do all of this stuff. And I was like, do they? So I was quite surprised.
Obviously non-residents can normally get around 50% loan to value. So again, that does open up that opportunity for non-residents to come in.
It's interesting to know,
And then I think what else is quite interesting is if you're not yet a resident of obviously Dubai, again, there's been an initiative over the last few years. I'm sure you've heard of the Golden Visa. You know, originally it's obviously a 10-year visa, and they've recently reduced obviously the price to be a minimum of 2 million. 2 million dirhams. I mean, again, don't get us to my currency exchange, but you know, it's a very accessible amount in that sense. So again, it is allowing those, you know, foreign investors to come in. Maybe they're considering to move over. There's those opportunities.
That's helped.
Then there's other renewable visas that start at 750,000 dirhams. So again, quite a minimal you know, down payment in that sense. So an opportunity again for, you know, making it more accessible to many. And then obviously I think, like I say, the biggest aspect as well would be developers. You need to be aware of obviously the developers, but that's where we come into play, because obviously as the brokerage, we have the relationship with the developers, and again we allow
I was just going to ask you that, how do you kind of, because you said it's such a fast market, how do you kind of keep on top of it? Are the developers telling you, or how do you like get that information so you can act fast as well and
fast is probably an understatement in a sense. So I think last quarter I went to a property event last week, and it was announced that there was a launch every 18 hours. So you can imagine, right, that is just insane. So again, just to kind of go back to the other question, there is the difference between obviously off-plan and secondary. So secondary are ready properties, and then off-plan are those that are obviously not
being
ready.
Developed,
So you're buying then at launch stage. So obviously, like I say, every 18 hours a new project was launched last quarter. I think there was over about 124 projects total obviously released to the market. And the next quarter, again, I know obviously they've got plans obviously for a lot more. So there is a lot of projects coming in, but they're not ready projects as well. So you have to take that into account.
So do you have good relationships with the developers as well? So they will let you know when something's coming out soon, so you can get ahead of everyone else?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely developers here that obviously have greater market share. So again, we always encourage our brokers to focus on the quality aspects and those with greater market share. However, there are some, you know, interesting smaller developers coming in, offering a fantastic opportunity, fantastic project, and maybe a little bit more accessible to a first-time investor, for example. And we do work with all of them because, again, part of being a broker is ultimately, again, creating relationship and maintaining that relationship. You know, my role is slightly separate. I bring in the business, whereas my sales team needs to, again, make sure that they're an expert in every project. They're an expert with the developers. They're an expert with, obviously, their area, their clients.
Having those relationships, it's really important.
Really key.
Of course.
Are you seeing any sort of trends in terms of the type of investors and the type of businesses that you're dealing with here in the UAE?
I mean, we definitely saw some trends post-COVID. Obviously, with, you know, different things going on in the world. You know, we saw a massive influx of obviously Russian buyers, obviously, over the last few years. You know, in terms of, you know, the origins of obviously our company, we're an Indian-grown company. And if you look at all of the major developers, the Indian market is always, you know, one of the top 3 investors, you know, in terms of who's buying. So again, there's definitely trends in that aspect. You know, originally, because obviously before Dubai became freehold and accessible to foreign investment, obviously GCC, so when I'd obviously look at data lists and who's previously owned, it used to be predominantly obviously, you know, GCC owners. That's obviously changed over time. But I'd say like recently, the big impact would be, like I say, the development of visas, making it more accessible.
Yes.
It's definitely becoming more of an open market. We've recently just had a private equity investor that's come in and invested a stake, obviously, into Anarock. And I had a meeting, obviously, with them last week. And he was highlighting to me how, like, a lot of, Indian, and I'm talking very wealthy investors, used to obviously go more over to the Singapore market, Singapore and Hong Kong. But because obviously the market has switched and different rules, regulations have come into place, he's like, now he's a very big advocate of bringing them over to Dubai because it is a very much open market and lots of opportunities here. So that's definitely a trend for probably us as a company.
Yes,
and then obviously we are seeing an increase of obviously Europeans. We're even beginning to see more kind of market coming in from, say, America, Canada. Weirdly, through partnerships, I've had a lot of business that's come through Canada. So
it keeps changing, but like I said, you see the trends, don't you? Like, okay, it's coming from there. So can you share with us like a memorable experience or a success story that you've had dealing with, whether it could be a family or a person, like from the work that you've done that you remember that you can mention?
Oh, there's loads. I mean, let's go back to kind of early days. So obviously, like early days, I was navigating this industry when it was really hard. It was around COVID times. People just obviously didn't want to sell, but obviously had to sell. There was a lot of distressed sellers, and rents were a lot lower then, and it was a different landscape. But I always remember having a client of mine, and they basically were private jet owners. Now, obviously coming from a flight attendant background, I just remember being able to kind of having that tailored approach to them because I understood their pain points. And again, going back to relationship, this is key in any business. Relationship's key. So understanding, who they are, what their specific needs are. So they were always kind of like one that's always stuck in my head because obviously I was like, this is interesting being on the other side of the, the side in that sense where I'm now bringing in money, whereas, before I was more kind of like tea or coffee, very different in that sense.
No, but it's great how you, from your experience, from where you started and obviously where you are now, and now your role in the partnerships as well is totally different to kind of selling and being a broker. So it's good how it's developed over the years, and I think you're a fantastic person to speak to because you've got such an overview of, like we said, about the trends and the market. And I think anyone that's looking to kind of buy or invest or even they want to sell something, I think you'd be great or to talk to as well. So we'd love to point you in the right direction.
I'm definitely that person where so in terms of, say, obviously when partners share obviously our leads, initially the leads come to us, to me, personally, and I will again give the overview of Dubai. So first time investors, I'm a brilliant touch point because again, 12 years experience. This is coming from obviously a personal background. Again, the awareness of obviously the developers and how they've developed over time because they have. We've seen obviously one of the largest private developers grow massively in the last 5 years. And so again, I'm definitely that good touch point. But like I say, then in terms of, say, our leads, what I do find is different in terms of my team is we don't hire freshers. So there's a lot of agencies out here which will hire, fresh meat, so to speak. Nothing against it. Of course, they've got the hunger and the drive, but they don't have the expertise or the knowledge of obviously the landscape that we're selling.
And obviously you train them as well.
And like I say, it can be a bit of a conveyor belt of brokers. So again, another point would be make sure you've got a broker that has got experience. So obviously, again, in terms of our team, they're very, very experienced. And again, with obviously partnerships, because I am dealing with a lot of high profile individuals and businesses, again, when they're obviously sharing on their networks, obviously those leads then get distributed to associate directors only. So associate directors have strict criteria, certain sales abilities, certain qualities.
So you've got to really build with that relationship, that trust with those businesses, and obviously then you work together. So it's really interesting. So what we're going to do is, because we've been told we haven't got much time left, so we'd love to get you on again. But I think, as I said, this whole podcast was made for experts. You're an expert in your field. And what we would like you to kind of end the podcast with is telling us, giving either some advice or some, I would say, pearls of wisdom, just for our listeners on what kind of advice you would give them, whether it's to do with real estate or anything else that you want to share with anyone listening, and also how they can contact you as well.
I think it's just there's just so many opportunities here. So you've really got to obviously embrace that with the UAE. You know, I obviously touched on it before, but what we have done in 50 years is just incredible. And, you know, say yes to every opportunity. And, you know, I guess in the sense, do get out of Dubai, you know, because there's lots of travel opportunities. I think 40% of the world's within a 6-hour radius. Come back and then you'll see how good you have it here. And I just think, you know, if you have the opportunity to spend some time here, whether, you know, you are moving a business here or you just obviously, you know, want to see a trip and like try it, it's honestly the most progressive, proactive place I've ever come across.
I always say that, it's really progressive. It's continuously trying to be better, and it's great because that's what people are drawn to and attracted to. And how can Natalie people get in touch with you? Then what's the best way? Is it on your website? Is it by email?
Obviously my email would probably be the most direct, so that would obviously be natalie.callaghan@anarock.me.
We'll share that as well.
Share that. And then obviously for LinkedIn, I'd be on Natalie Callaghan. So I'm focusing purely on that aspect with that platform. And then obviously my number, we can obviously share that as well.
Yeah, brilliant. We'll share those details with you. But it's been really interesting actually, because I always feel like the real estate market is crazy.
It is saturated and it's a bit of a minefield.
But it's good to talk to someone like yourself who's been in it, who's kind of seen it all, and now is kind of, it's the great overview that you've given us. I mean, for someone like us who we just deal with like family law cases and obviously expats as well, we get anyone as well, we can obviously point them towards you as well. And we do get people asking us, even just generally sometimes, like, you know, what do? I want to move. And just even in conversations, it'd be great to kind of point them in your direction as well.
Certainly.
So thank you so much for your time, making time for us.
Speaking.
And we'd love to talk to you again soon.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.